Welcome to this special edition of the Weekly Transit. Let's call it a bonus midweek episode, but it's special because I've never done this before, but it's something that I hope to maintain moving forward week to week, depending on the time it takes me to record and produce, and of course, the response that I receive from you, the listener. My goal is to continue with the Weekly Transit as you know it with Gabriella, where we cover the cosmic transits each week, what that means, and how to work with the energy, which will be released as it has been regularly on Saturday, so you have all the planetary information you need to guide you through the week. That will in turn be coupled with these bonus episodes that I will do by myself and release midweek on Tuesdays, Wednesdays. We'll see how that goes, but during which we will cover everything from politics, pop culture, sports, and my favorite, the celebrity astrological profiles, which have been recommended by you. I've already received requests to do a chart reading for Paul Walker, Jim Morrison, Jason Bateman, David Bowie, and John Lennon, and I'm looking forward to doing all of those. But in this episode, I'm going to be getting into the deep end of the water here, politics, but there's just a lot going on, and there's a lot that I want to talk about, and I just really felt a little constricted trying to squeeze everything into our weekly transit episode that we normally do, along with all the other transits. It's just too much. I mean, I'm going to be recording like 2-hour episodes, and that just feels like a lot. So I want to break it down into 2 episodes a week, one covering the transits and the other one covering pop culture and what's going on in the world. So my purpose for this iteration of the weekly transit is to give you, the listener, an understanding of the astrological influences on society, our public figures, and through that understanding, you will hopefully learn more about astrology, yourself, and your own astrological code, because we are all a reflection of those we come into contact with, even those that we are connecting to that are people that don't know us. So like public figures, they don't know who we are, but we know who they are. And so why do we gravitate towards certain public figures? Why am I a fan of this person? Or why does this other person really drive me nuts? Whatever it is, they are most likely reflecting something within you that you are unable or unwilling to see within yourself. So the goal of this iteration of the weekly transit is to help uncover the astrological influences that shape our world, our public figures, and through that understanding, you'll hopefully have a deeper understanding of yourself. Now, I'm going to do my best to stay neutral and unbiased, especially in episodes like this one, where I'm going to be getting deep into politics, mainly Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yes, we've got a third candidate. And of course, he's hanging on. He's clinging here to his candidacy, but it's a challenge because he's not receiving any sort of coverage by the mainstream media. And it makes sense. He is a very polarizing figure when it comes to his stance on vaccines. And the news media, the mainstream news media, is funded by pharmaceutical companies. So of course, they're not going to want to give much airtime to somebody who is dragging them through the mud, let's say, and giving them bad press by talking negatively about the products that they make. So that's just the way things are. But he does bring an interesting dynamic to this 3-person race. And I do think that Kamala Harris is going to be the candidate for the Democratic Party. I also have a kind of a wild prediction about Kamala Harris that I'll get to a little bit later. But, she raised $50 million the day that she announced her candidacy, the day that Joe Biden stepped away from running for president. So what was going on in her chart there? We talked a little bit about what was going on in Biden's chart the day that he stepped away from the election, from his candidacy. I spoke about that on my Instagram page, and if you're not following me on Instagram, it's at the Weekly Transit. But the day that came out, I pointed out that Uranus, the planet of revolution, rebellion, innovation, independence, the unexpected, transiting through Taurus at 26 degrees, the fixed earth sign symbolized by the bull. It's been opposing Joe Biden's sun, the planet of light, life, and vitality. He was born with the sun in Scorpio at 27 degrees. It's been moving into opposition, Uranus, the planet of the unexpected, moving into opposition with Joe Biden's sun, the planet of vitality, since the debates. And so that's just been ramping up. But why did it pop on Sunday the 21st? And the reason is I am presuming, from an astrological perspective, is because Mercury, the messenger of the gods. So Joe Biden is giving a message. It's a difficult message. It's a message that he's resigning his candidacy for president. That's a difficult message for anyone to give. Certainly for him, I imagine that it was. And Mercury at 26 degrees in Leo on Sunday was not only squaring the transiting Uranus, but it was also squaring Joe Biden's sun. So I think that's why everything went down the day that it went down from an astrological perspective. But as I said, I want to maintain neutrality here. I honestly look at every individual that I see in the public frame, and I try to look at them with love and respect, just as I look at every client that I work with love and respect. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to judge them. I'm here to uncover the astrological influences so we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves. So my purpose as a host is to bring clarity to the chaos, so you feel empowered through the astrological knowledge shared here, which will hopefully give you a deeper understanding of this ancient language and how it reflects within you. So you have the ability to make the best choices in your life that support you on your path. So, that being said, let's get into these three candidates for president. Now, I said that I want to speak about each of them with respect, and in doing so, I want to point something out about them. These individuals, they're all putting themselves out there. And that's not an easy thing to do. We deify these individuals. We lift them up as our savior, and we tear them down as if they're the Antichrist. And honestly, they're just people that put their clothes on one leg at a time, I presume, and they need food to eat. They breathe air like we do. And so they're all experiencing challenges in their lives as they're going through this process of the election. So I have respect for them in terms of putting themselves out there. That's not an easy thing to do. I think of myself here right now talking to you. It's not easy for me to be here having this conversation to a camera, sending it out there to whoever's going to listen to this, and hope that they receive something positive from what I'm sharing. And I really think or hope that Trump, Kamala, and RFK Jr. all have the same intentions. Now, I don't know, and we can presume, but again, I'm not going to judge them. At the same time, on the other side of the coin, I want to describe my perception of leadership. Now, these individuals are leaders because they have people that follow them. How many people can show up at any place in the world, in this country, and literally have thousands of people say, I want to see this person talk? That in and of itself is a form of leadership, but ultimately I view them as authoritarian figureheads. They have a certain level of authority, which is given to them by us, the people. Maybe there's other people above them that are pulling the strings. That's certainly a possibility. But ultimately, we, the people, are giving them power. And we're giving them their authority. And so in thinking about that, I'd like you to really think about your reasoning for giving your power to not just these individuals, but any individual. And Pluto, the planet of transformation, is going to transit back into Capricorn one last time from September 1st to November 19th. That's going to be during the election. Capricorn is cardinal Earth. It's symbolized by the goat and ruled by Saturn, the god of wealth and time. Pluto's the god of death. And this period from September 1st to November 19th is going to be the last time that Pluto's transiting through Capricorn for another 230 years. That's right. You heard me correct. When Pluto exits from Capricorn on November 19th, it's not going to return to Capricorn until February 28th, 2254. So things are about to get intense here, because the way that I look at it, these planetary energies are really urging you to make some hard decisions about where you're giving your authority. Are you taking responsibility for yourself, or are you entrusting others to take responsibility for you? The planets and stars, God, whatever higher power you believe in, wherever we are, however this thing works, the energy is urging you to take responsibility for yourself. That's why we're in such a chaotic time, where a president is going to resign their candidacy in the midst of the election for their second term, while another president was nearly assassinated. These aren't normal occurrences in the election process. So we're being shaken to our core here, and we're being called to take responsibility for ourselves. Because the most powerful person in the world is the one who's staring you back in the mirror. The most powerful person in the world is that individual that is staring back at you in the mirror. That's you. So what is leadership? What is true leadership? I think of it like this. If you're an athlete, like if you had a quarterback who threw 4 touchdowns and led the offense to score 35 points in a game, and after the game, they lost 42-35, let's say. They lost by 7 points. After the game, the reporters go up to the quarterback and say, "What happened? What happened? What do you mean? Why did you lose?" "Oh, well, I don't know. Did you watch the game? Because you saw me throw 4 touchdown passes. No interceptions, no turnovers. I led the offense to score 35 points, and what did the defense do? The defense gave up 42 points. So you're asking me what happened? Why did we lose? It's obviously their fault." People would destroy that quarterback for what he said, because he's not taking any accountability for himself. He's putting all the blame on everyone else. Even if he had the best game ever, that's not what leaders do. Leaders give credit when they succeed, and they take the blame for the failures. When you do that, when you have the strength to do that, the people that are working with you are really going to want to fight for you. They're going to want to work with you as opposed to against you. Because if you're blaming every loss on the defense and you're on the offense, the defense is going to start blaming the losses on the offense, and it's just going to create chaos within the locker room, and it's going to create a losing mentality. And that's essentially what we have in this country with these two political parties. They might talk about unity, but when push comes to shove, they're never celebrating or encouraging one another, and they're not taking responsibility for their failures. They're always pointing the finger. And so, maybe it's time to stop putting these individuals on these pedestals and to start looking them as men and women, just like us. Let's humanize them. And if we can do that while also empowering ourselves, hopefully we can cultivate an energy of peace within this chaotic time, which is likely to continue, at least through the election season, but even into next year, because there's a lot of transits that are occurring that are very intense. And these transits are seeped in difficult historical times. Very difficult historical times. Talking about World War II, the Civil War, the American Revolution, the French Revolution. That's where these planets are headed. That's where they are right now. So the way that we can work with the energy is, rather than follow the lead of these authoritarian figureheads that are constantly pointing the finger at everyone else for the problem, instead of taking responsibility for themselves, instead of lifting people up, maybe we need to lead them. And that's my hope with this 20-year period that's going to begin on November 19th, where Pluto will be transiting through Aquarius for the next 20 years. The god of death, the planet of transformation, in the sign that represents the community. At the highest frequency of this energy, we are working together. Everyone's taking responsibility for themselves and holding themselves accountable for what it is they need to contribute to the group. In the lowest level of this frequency, we're being forced, or we're forcing others to think like we do, talk like we do, and act like we do. At the highest level of this frequency, we are appreciating every individual for their independence, their independent point of view. Because let's be honest, the greatness of the United States of America is not rooted in the politicians. It's rooted in the people. Every individual. So let's strive to get to a point where we can all appreciate different opinions and think of them as a different ingredient or a different dish at a potluck. Maybe you don't like it, but you don't have to try it. You don't have to eat it. It's when you try to force feed something to somebody that they don't want to eat, that's when it becomes a problem. So let's appreciate one another, recognize that we're all here on planet Earth together. We're stuck here. So we have to learn to deal with one another in a way that's respectful, at the very least, and at the highest frequency, loving and appreciative of the perspectives that are different than mine or that are different than yours. So let's break down these 3 political candidates for president and how they've been shaped by the planets and stars. Now, I want to look at the primal triad of each of these individuals, as well as the North Node. The primal triad is the most recognizable traits of your personality. This is the sun, which is your identity, which is symbolized by a circle of spirit. Inside a circle of spirit, signifying your eternal soul, no beginning, no end, and the eternal divine light that shines within you. The sun is the giver of light, life, and vitality. Wherever the sun goes, it brings light, life, and vitality. So the sign that the sun is in is the filter for that energetic frequency, and the house where the sun is in is where the energy of that planet is being directed. So when we're talking about the sun is bringing light, life, and vitality to whichever house it's in. For Kamala Harris, it's the 5th house. For RFK Jr., it's the 6th house. For Donald Trump, it's the 10th house. I'll get into what each of these houses mean and how they're reflected in these individuals, and also how the placement of the sun in each of these houses is reflecting with everyone, with each of them. There's a lot of reflection between these 3. The moon is the second piece of the primal triad. The moon is easily recognizable because it looks like the moon. It's a crescent moon, but the moon is also 2 crescents of receptivity stuck together, which, like the circle of spirit, is one of the 3 root symbols of the language of astrology. The circle of spirit, the cross of matter, and the crescent of receptivity. Those are the 3 root symbols. The moon represents giving, receiving, teaching, learning at the deepest emotional level. The moon you're able to see in the sky because it's reflecting the light of the sun. Therefore, the light that is emanating off of the moon is literally past light. Therefore, the moon represents your past, your roots, your upbringing, your childhood, the ones who raised and nurtured you, and your ancestors. The moon represents the home where you were raised, the home where you live now. It represents what you need to feel fulfilled emotionally and how you respond when you are emotional. Like the sun, whichever sign the moon is in, it is the filter for the planetary energy, the energy of emotions in the past, and the house is where that energy is directed. We'll get into the signs in a minute, but the houses for each of these individuals, the moon is in the 4th house for Donald Trump, 11th house for Kamala Harris, and it's in the 12th house for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. More on what that means in a minute. The 3rd piece of the primal triad is the ascendant or rising sign. This is your outer shell, your face, your body, your personality, and the essence of your soul. I like to think of the primal triad as a lemon. The sun is the juice. It's the whole purpose for the fruit. It's your identity. The seeds, that's the moon. It's your roots. It's where you come from, your emotional core. And the peel, that's the ascendant or rising sign. It's your outer shell, your face, your body, your personality, the essence of your soul. Just as you can slice off a bit of that peel and twist it and see the effervescence of the lemon fall out of the peel, the rising sign is the essence of your soul. Kamala Harris, the essence of her soul, her ascendant, her rising sign is in Gemini at 24 degrees. Gemini is the mutable air sign, symbolized by the twins and ruled by Mercury, the messenger of the gods, guide of souls to the underworld, the planet of consciousness, communication, and coordination. And I've heard some talk about Kamala Harris that, she's not that smart. She's not that smart. I mean, I literally heard somebody yesterday who I know, who knows somebody who worked with Kamala Harris, who said, she's not that smart. Do not discount these individuals. Do not discount Kamala Harris. Do not discount Donald Trump. Do not discount Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You're not in a position that they're in if you're not smart. They have to have some wits about them. And I know there's going to be jokes about Biden here because his mental faculties have not been in prime condition. But he got to this point because he has some intelligence. Now, the reason why I say this specifically regarding Kamala Harris is because Kamala Harris, Gemini. When I think of Gemini, I think of the twins. One twin is the intellectual, and the other twin is the airhead. So when Kamala is around people she doesn't know, in situations where she's uncomfortable, places where she's unfamiliar, if she ever feels threatened, she's either showing the intellectual or the airhead. Depends on the group. And I think of Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, like Donald Trump, is a 10th house Gemini sun. So interestingly enough, Kamala Harris was born with the ascendant at 24 degrees in Gemini. Donald Trump was born with the sun at 22 degrees in Gemini. So Donald Trump's sense of vitality and energy is within 2 degrees of Kamala Harris's personality and the essence of her soul. Now, I bring up Marilyn Monroe because, like Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, Marilyn Monroe has been accused of not being that smart, being ditzy, being an airhead, the dumb blonde. And yes, she put out that persona, but let's not forget about the intellectual, because Marilyn Monroe in the 1950s and 60s had her own production company. How many women in the 1950s or 60s had their own production company that they owned? I'm not sure what the number is, but I would venture to guess that she was probably the only one. It takes some intelligence to navigate the world that she was living in and to create her own production company. So, again, do not discount the Gemini and the intellect of anyone who has Gemini in their primal triad. These are bright people, very bright. So why do these individuals, why are they drawn to this energy, to be in the arena, to be a part of this political theater? It is called the political theater. And yes, these individuals will have great power if and when they are elected to office or they take office in whatever manner that may be. The decisions that they make will affect the many. But again, the most powerful person in the world is the individual that's staring you back in the mirror. So really cultivate an attitude that it doesn't matter what happens during this election, you are going to win. You are going to thrive. But when you think of theater, when I think of theater, when I think of film or television or people in front of the camera, there's one sign that I think of the most. And that sign is Leo, which is the fixed fire sign symbolized by the lion and ruled by the sun. The sun is the center of our solar system. It's the vital light that gives energy to our domain, Earth. We have life because of the sun. No sun, no life. The lion is the creature that everybody wants to see. Whether you're at a zoo, a circus, or on safari in Africa, everybody wants to see a lion. So this is the sign that attracts attention and covets it. And each of these individuals, all three of them, have elements of their primal triad that are a reflection of Leo. Before I get to what that is, I just want to point something out here. Because if we go back to George Herbert Walker Bush, he was a Leo rising. Bill Clinton, Leo sun. George W. Bush, Leo rising. Barack Obama, Leo sun. Donald Trump, Leo rising. And Joe Biden, even though his primal triad is a Scorpio sun, a Sagittarius rising, and a Taurus moon, that Taurus moon is in the 5th house. And the 5th house is associated with the 5th sign, which is, you guessed it, Leo. Queen Elizabeth II was born with a Leo moon. Her son, King Charles, is a Leo rising. So as I said, Donald Trump is also a Leo rising. RFK Jr. is a Leo rising. And Kamala Harris, though her primal triad is Gemini rising, Libra sun, and Aries moon, her sun is in the 5th house. And the 5th house is associated with the 5th sign, which, as we said before, is Leo. Which means the sun is the planetary ruler of the 5th house, which means Kamala Harris's sun is in a position of power because it's in the house that it rules, the house of children, which represents not just actual children, because Kamala Harris doesn't have any biological children. She has 2 stepchildren. But being born with the sun in the 5th house represents someone who is comfortable being the center of attention, to have fun, to enjoy life, to be playful. That's the energy of the 5th house sun. For Donald Trump and RFK Jr., Leo rising means that when they're threatened, like you saw Donald Trump threatened during his speech in Butler, Pennsylvania, how did he respond to that? Timidly? No. He responded as the lion. And that was also encouraged by the fact that he was born with Mars, the god of war, conjunct his ascendant. So he has a very combative personality, but is also very prideful. Now, their moons. All 3 of these individuals were born under a full moon. Think about the rarity of that. The full moon happens once every 28 days. So I'm not sure what the odds are for 3 people that are running for president to all be born under a full moon, but I'd say that's pretty long odds. Now, RFK Jr. isn't an exact full moon, but the moon was in the sign that was opposite his sun at the moment of birth. RFK Jr. was born with the sun in Capricorn in the 6th house and the moon in Cancer in the 12th house. Cancer is the sign that's opposite Capricorn, and the 12th house is the house that's opposite the 6th house. What this means, when someone's born under a full moon, there is a polarization that is existing within them, where they are seemingly at odds with themselves. Their identity says that this is who I am, but their emotions want something very different. So each of these individuals is really working to find the balance between these two energies. And all three of them were born with the North Node that is aligning to the Sun, or the Moon, or both, or the Ascendant. So all three of these individuals are really living a purpose-driven life. You may not like what their purpose is, but they're here for a reason, just as you are. Refrain from becoming a victim to them and empower yourself. RFK Jr. was born with the Sun in Capricorn and the North Node in Capricorn. RFK Jr., just when you think about the numbers too here, RFK Jr. was born with the Sun at 27 degrees in Capricorn and the North Node at 24 degrees in Capricorn. Kamala Harris was born with the Sun at 27 degrees in Libra, the Moon at 27 degrees in Aries, and the North Node at 24 degrees in Gemini. Donald Trump was born with the Sun at 22 degrees in Gemini, the North Node at 20 degrees in Gemini, and the Moon at 21 degrees in Sagittarius. So there's a lot of similarity in the numbers here. But for RFK Jr., his soul's purpose is to set goals and commit to doing the work required to accomplish and achieve those goals for the purpose of being of service to others. Because the sixth house, where his North Node is the house of service. It's where his Sun is, it's where his North Node is. So being somebody who's very detail-oriented and really focusing on goals and ambitions that give back to the many. It feels like he is living his soul's purpose to a degree. I mean, he comes from a very powerful family and could seemingly do whatever he wanted to do in his life. And he chose to be an activist for the environment and vaccine injuries. Now his moon, the South Node, are in Cancer in the 12th house, which is reflecting home life and dreams. There's also a polarity here between the father and the mother. If you're born with the Sun opposite the Moon, and it's 14 degrees away for RFK, the Moon's at 13 degrees in Cancer, the Sun's at 27 degrees in Capricorn, but it's still in opposite signs. And when you think about his upbringing, his father was assassinated when he was just like 12, 13 years old, 14 maybe. And he was taken from him at a young age. His father was the breadwinner, the one who was out working, and the mother was the one who was at home, the homemaker, nurturing. So that's the polarity that Robert F. Kennedy experienced with his parents. Donald Trump experienced a similar polarity with his parents. Even though Donald Trump was born with the Sun in Gemini and the Moon in Sagittarius rather than Capricorn and Cancer, like RFK Jr., Donald Trump was born with the Sun in the 10th house, which is associated with the 10th sign, which is Capricorn, and the Moon in the 4th house, which is associated with the 4th sign, which is Cancer, and is the house that is ruled by the Moon. So RFK Jr.'s Moon is in a position of power because it's in the sign that it rules, and Donald Trump's Moon is in a position of power because it's in the house that it rules. So in a sense, one way to look at it is Donald Trump's Sun is in Capricorn and his Moon is in Cancer, or the houses that are associated with those signs. And Like RFK Jr., Donald Trump's father was the breadwinner and his mother was the homemaker. And that was the polarity that he experienced with his parents that exists within him. Now, Donald Trump, like RFK Jr., was born with the North Node just a couple degrees away from his sun. But maybe it's a little more challenging for Donald Trump than RFK Jr. Because Donald Trump's moon is conjunct his south node, where RFK Jr.'s south node is 11 degrees away from his moon. So it might be a little harder, a little more challenging, perhaps, for Donald Trump to be following his soul's purpose. And you can definitely see how he slips into that south node energy, though you can also see how he follows his north node, his soul's purpose. Donald Trump's soul's purpose is to ask questions, gather information, learn a little bit about a lot, to listen, and to listen from that place of authority and power. Where he has trouble is the listening. Now, he does it sometimes. I did hear in part of his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention, I heard him mention that he talked to a waitress. And this one really touched me because I spent 20 years waiting tables. And he was out at a restaurant and he asked this server how she was doing. And she said she wasn't doing well, according to him, that times were tough. And she's having trouble making paying her taxes. And Donald Trump said, well, you have to pay taxes on the cash? And he's asking another question. He's gathering more information. And she said, well, people don't really pay cash anymore. So the tips basically go through my paycheck and I get taxed on all those. And he said, well, how would it feel if we didn't tax tips anymore? Again, asking a question. She's like, are you kidding me? Like, that would be amazing. And so whether he follows through with this and cuts all service industry workers of having to declare taxes on tips, we shall see. But that's really Donald Trump in his highest frequency, when he's using that position of power to listen and learn from others. And that's really what I hope for him or from him as a leader, is to listen, not only to his own constituents, but to everybody, the people on the other side of the aisle. Now, where he falls into a trap is that South Node energy in Sagittarius. When he gets emotional, that's when his South Node energy is activated. And that's when he just can't stop. He knows all the answers, and he just goes on and on and on and on, telling you everything that he knows, whether it's true or not. It's what he believes to be true. But it's that frequency that really pushes people away. Now, Kamala Harris has this similar frequency, because Kamala Harris, like Donald Trump, was born with the North Node in Gemini. So Kamala Harris, like Donald Trump, is meant to listen, to learn, to ask questions, to gather information. So the more that she is connecting with the public and asking those questions, the more she's going to be in that higher frequency. Now, the North Node is in the first house for Kamala Harris, so she is meant to really focus on asking questions that are authentic and courageous, to really put herself out there in a courageous way, which she is. To be running for president takes a lot of courage. But she needs to ask the questions that maybe other people are afraid to ask. And by asking those questions, that's how she's going to endure not only her constituency, but also the others who are on the fence. Now, I want to get to that big prediction that I have. But first, before I do, I just want to point out that Kamala Harris, the day that Joe Biden dropped out of the race, raised $50 million for her campaign in a single day. That's very impressive because Donald Trump's largest haul in a single day was $52 million, which was the day that he was convicted of 34 felonies. So it's an impressive number to bring in for any candidate, 50 million. Now, how did that happen? Well, while Mercury was squaring Joe Biden's sun, creating that discomfort to communication, remember that Mercury is not just the messenger of the gods, it's also the god of merchants and thieves. So it's about commerce. Mercury represents commerce and the exchange of money. I know people think of money as being Venus, and it is, but Mercury is the exchange of money. It's the person that's delivering the money. It's the messenger. What's interesting is as Mercury was squaring Joe Biden's sun, it was forming a positive aspect, a sextile to Kamala Harris's sun at 27 degrees in Libra. See, Joe Biden was born with the sun at 27 degrees in Scorpio. RFK was born with the sun at 27 degrees in Capricorn. What is this? It's like, and Kamala Harris was born with the sun at 27 degrees in Libra. That's a air-fire connection with Mercury in Leo, which is fire, and Libra, the sun in Libra, which is air. Libra is ruled by Venus, the planet that represents money. And Mercury was in Leo, the sign that is ruled by the sun. So it's aligning with the sun in Kamala's chart, while also aligning with her moon at 27 degrees in Aries. So that felt like it was creating some sort of abundance for her, and it did. She was able to really get what it is she needs to speak from that place of confidence, like the Queen. Now, I want to point one other important aspect out. When you think about RFK Jr. and Kamala Harris, I really feel like in some ways Donald Trump isn't Kamala Harris's biggest problem politically. I think her biggest problem is RFK Jr. And you can see that astrologically because his sun is at 27 degrees in Capricorn. Her sun is at 27 degrees in Libra. Libra is cardinal air. Capricorn is cardinal earth. They're both cardinal. They make a strong aspect to each other. But earth and air don't mix. That creates tension. Now, RFK Jr.'s sun at 27 degrees in Capricorn is also squaring Kamala's moon at 27 degrees in Aries, which is cardinal fire. Cardinal, like Capricorn, but fire scorches earth, earth extinguishes fire. So it feels like RFK Jr., by being in this race, is extinguishing Kamala's fire. Because when you break it down, Donald Trump has his base, and his base is going to vote for Donald Trump. Come hell or high water, they're voting for Donald Trump. Kamala is finding her base, RFK finding his base. But those bases, they tend to maybe have more coherence with each other than the Donald Trump base. So it feels like RFK Jr. is getting in the way of Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris is getting in the way of RFK Jr. You already heard RFK Jr. saying that he's the only one that can beat Donald Trump, and he's willing to field a phone call from the head of the DNC. That's probably not going to happen because of his political stance and the DNC's relationship to the pharmaceutical companies. So, the big prediction is, I believe that Kamala Harris may be the 47th president and still lose the election. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 6 weeks, Joe Biden resigns from the presidency, because this Uranus is going to continue being stagnant. It's moving to 27 degrees and then stopping before it moves retrograde. That's directly opposite Joe Biden's sun. So it's like the planets aren't done shaking him to his core and creating that sense of revolution to his identity. A revolution to his identity would be people are no longer calling him the President of the United States. If the Democrats make this move in August, I feel like that would be a mistake for them because Mercury is going to be retrograde in August. And any sort of shifting that's going on in August could be reversed by the time we get to November or even September. I see a window for them to make this move around September 8th, maybe at the earliest, but you probably want to wait until after September 11th. Because September 11th is the day that Mercury moves out of its retrograde shadow. Though September 8th is when Jupiter is going to be in favorable alignment with Kamala Harris's Mars, expanding her sense of courage and action. She was born with Mars in which sign? Can you guess it? That's right, Leo. She was born with Mars at 21 degrees in Leo, so when she acts boldly, courageously. Oh, and there's one other thing that I wanted to mention about RFK and Kamala. Kamala was born with Neptune at 16 degrees in Scorpio, and RFK was born with Mars at 16 degrees in Scorpio. So RFK is going to have trouble seeing his way to the finish line with Kamala in the race because she is creating this great cloud around his Mars-like energy, his action, his go energy. But he may also be aggravating her dreams and fantasies and what it is she wants to manifest for herself to be president. Now, it feels like there's also an opening around September 8th because Jupiter is going to be creating that sense of expansion to Kamala's Mars, giving her the courage to move forward from her heart boldly, courageously, presidentially. And Mars, the transiting Mars, will be at 2 degrees or around 2 degrees in Cancer, which is going to form a trine to her midheaven, which is that represents the highest form of achievement, goals and ambitions. So it's giving her a boost to manifest her goals into reality. I hope you learned something from this, not only astrologically, but hopefully spiritually within yourself. I hope that this episode of the podcast empowers you and encourages you moving forward to really tap into your own energy and make a commitment to yourself to win through this election season, regardless of what happens. That you are going to thrive and you are going to create that sense of peace and harmony within your life and within the lives of those around you so that they can create that ripple effect that goes across the globe, across the world, and touches everyone in a positive way. So I hope this is helpful to you. Let me know. I wish you all the best as you ride the planetary waves. Thank you for listening to the weekly transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any others may be affecting you, or if you are interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog-Lyman. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.